Well, I think actually this is one of the key questions for 2013. In my opinion, investors are being too optimistic, too relaxed, even too complacent about the threats that Europe will pose in 2013. One of the responses I gave earlier was saying, well, actually it's not necessarily the right time to buy the riskier assets, certainly equities at the present time. And I think if you look at the bond yields that are prevailing in Spain and Italy, for example, I think that reinforces the point. An awful lot of good assumptions have been made about the abilities of these economies to finance themselves. Yes, Italy and Spain have got bonds away in recent times. And if you look at the fall in the spread, the yield premium over German bonds, that has collapsed, has really come down. These bond markets have given great returns over the last 6 to 12 months. But actually, I think this dodges reality. If you look at Italy, Italy is a classic case in point at the moment. A lot of money has been made by buying Italian bonds over the last 6 months. But actually, on the ground, the economy is just not improving. Yes, government deficits are improving, but actually the underlying performance of the economy is poor. Again, let's look at Italy in a bit more detail. In a situation in which you have a single currency and countries come together, they basically come together at that one currency and that one rate. Italy in the past has been used to devaluing its currency as a way of getting a regular competitive advantage over its neighbours. It just can't do that at the moment. So what it has to do to be competitive is reduce its labour costs. So is Italy doing that? Well, simply no, it's not. In fact, it's going in the opposite direction. Italy is becoming more and more uncompetitive from a unit labour cost perspective. They can't dodge this ultimately. They can't devalue. They're not taking the internal reforms to change that. Yes, Monti has made some good progress. But actually, you now have to ask, will those reforms be continued? We're facing an election coming up in a week's time in Italy that is really crucial to Europe. If Monti does not form part of that government, the continuing to reform, I think there will be renewed questions about the ability of these countries to instigate internal reform, the ability of these countries to generate growth in the medium term. So I think in answer to that question, actually we are coming up to some fairly important points fairly soon that I think will challenge the complacency. But going back to an answer I gave earlier, the core problem, not just in Italy, I focused on Italy because that's topical in terms of the elections, but in terms of those countries that came under pressure, the question still remains, where does long-term growth come from? Where you've got population stagnation, where you've got low productivity growth, where you've got leverage that has to be taken out of the system, where you've got some challenges perhaps to long-term growth rates globally, these economies are really under pressure. And I think investors will have to focus on that again in 2013. I'm not saying it's going to be a repeat of some of those really crisis periods that we felt in 2011, but I do think some of that complacency will have to be challenged, and that will give rise to volatility in markets. So we are certainly not out of the woods when it comes to Europe. I mean, I could widen this. You asked about Europe. I think you could widen it to also look at the US, where coming up fairly soon, 1st of March, is the question of the implementation of these mandated cuts. Again, I think investors are being very complacent about the impact that these cuts will have on growth, the cuts they will have on government spending, on real disposable income. So I think there are a number of hurdles that are really going to challenge markets over the next 3 to 6 months. So I think it's time to reappraise some of those easy assumptions, some of the complacency that has been built into markets.